Okay, this is a part about Saussure and Jakobson in structuralism and semiotics, which is a part of this book by Terry Eagleton titled Literary Theory and Introduction. Literary structuralism flourished in the 1960s as an attempt to apply to literature the methods and insights of the founder of modern structural linguistics, Ferdinand de Saussure. Since many popularizing accounts of Saussure's epoch-making course in general linguistics, 1916, are now available, I shall merely sketch in a few of his central positions. Saussure viewed language as a system of signs which was to be studied synchronically, that is to say, studied as a complete system at a given point in time, rather than diachronically in its historical development. Each sign was to be seen as being made up of a signifier, a sound image or its graphic equivalent, and a signified, the concept or meaning. That's a little unclear right now, but the three black marks CAT are a signifier which evoke the signified cat in an English mind. The relation between signifier and signified is an arbitrary one. There is no inherent reason why these three marks should mean cat, other than cultural and historical convention. Contrast chat in French. The relation between the whole sign and what it refers to, what Saussure calls a reference, the real furry four-legged creature, is therefore also arbitrary. Each sign in this system has meaning only by virtue of its difference from the others. That's worth repeating, actually. I think that's a central point. Each sign in the system has meaning only by virtue of its difference from the others. Cat has meaning not in itself, but because it is not cap or cat, cad or bat. It does not matter how the signifier alters, as long as it preserves its differences from all the other signifiers. You can pronounce it in many different accents as long as this difference is maintained. In the linguistic system, says Saussure, there are only differences. Meaning is not mysteriously immanent in a sign, but is functional, the result of its differences from other signs. Finally, Saussure believed that linguistics would get into a hopeless mess if it concerned itself with actual speech, or parole, as he called it. He was not interested in investigating what people actually said. He was concerned with the objective structure of signs, which made their speech possible in the first place, and this he called langue. Neither was Saussure concerned with the real objects which people spoke about. In order to study language effectively, the reference of the signs, things they actually denoted, had to be placed in brackets. Structuralism in general is an attempt to apply this linguistic theory to objects and activities other than language itself. You can view a myth, wrestling match, a system of tribal kinship, restaurant menu, or oil painting as a system of signs, and a structuralist analysis will try to isolate the underlying set of laws by which these signs are combined into meanings. I also had here, sorry to break away from the direct reading, that structuralism is really big in philosophy of science. Structural realism, which kind of says that mathematics is really what science is getting right. Anyway, it will largely ignore what these signs actually say and concentrate instead on their internal relations to one another. Structuralism, as Frederick Jameson has put it, is an attempt to rethink everything through once again in terms of linguistics. It is a symptom of the fact that language with its problems, mysteries, and implications has become both paradigm and obsession for 20th century intellectual life. Saussure's linguistic views influenced the Russian formalists, although formalism is not itself exactly a structuralism. It views literary texts structurally and suspends attention to the referent to examine the sign itself, but is not particularly concerned with meaning as differential or, in much of its work, with the deep laws and structures underlying literary texts. It was one of the Russian formalists, however, the linguist Roman Jakobson, who was to provide the major link between formalism and modern-day structuralism. Jakobson was leader of the Moscow Linguistic Circle, a formalist group founded in 1915, and in 1920 migrated to Prague to become one of the major theoreticians of Czech structuralism. The Prague Linguistic Circle was founded in 1926 and survived until the outbreak of the Second World War. Jakobson later migrated once more, this time to the US, where he encountered the French anthropologist Claude Lévi-Strauss during the Second World War, in an intellectual relationship out of which much of modern structuralism was to develop. Jakobson's influence can be detected everywhere within formalism, Czech structuralism, and modern linguistics. But he contributed in particular to poetics, which you can regard as part of the field of linguistics, was the idea that the poetic consisted above all in languages being placed in a certain kind of self-conscious relationship to itself. The poetic functioning of language promotes the palpability of signs, draws attention to their material qualities rather than simply using them as counters in communication. In the poet, the sign is dislocated from its object. The usual relation between sign and referent is disturbed, which allows the sign a certain independence as an object of value itself. All communication for Jakobson involves 6 elements: an addresser, an addressee, a message passed between them, a shared code which makes that meaning intelligible, a contact or physical medium of communication, and a context to which the message refers. Any one of these elements may dominate in a particular communicative act. Language seen from the addresser's viewpoint is emotive or expressive of a state of mind. From the addressee's standpoint, it is conative or trying for an effect. If communication concerns the context, it is referential. If it is oriented to the code itself, it is metalinguistic, as when two individuals discuss whether they are understanding each other. And communication angled toward the contact itself is phatic. Well, here we are chatting away at last. The poetic function is dominant when the communication focuses on the message itself, when the words themselves, rather than what it is said by whom for what purpose in that situation, are foregrounded in our attention. Jakobson also makes much of a distinction implicit in Saussure between the metaphorical and metonymic. In metaphor, one sign is substituted by another because it is somehow similar to it. Passion becomes flame. In metonymy, one sign is associated with another. Wing is associated with aircraft because it's a part of it. Sky with aircraft because of physical contiguity. We can make metaphors because we have a series of signs which are equivalent: passion, flame, love, and so on. When we speak or write, we select signs from a possible range of equivalences and then combine them together to form a sentence. What happens in poetry, however, is that we pay attention to equivalences in the process of combining words together as well as in selecting them. We string together words which are semantically or rhythmically or phonetically or in some way or some other way equivalent. This is why Jakobson is able to say, in a famous definition, that poetic function projects the principle of equivalence from the axis of selection to the axis of combination. Another way of saying that is that in poetry, similarity is superinduced upon contiguity. Words are not just strung together for the sake of the thoughts they convey, as in ordinary speech, but with an eye to the patterns of similarity, opposition, parallelism, and so on created by their sound, meaning, rhythm, and connotations. Some literary forms, realist prose for example, tend to be metonymic, linking signs by their associations with each other. Other forms, such as romantic and symbolist poetry, are highly metaphorical. The Prague School of Linguistics, Jakobson, Jan Makarovsky, Felix Vodica, and others, represent a kind of transition from formalism to modern structuralism. They elaborated the ideas of the formalists, but systematized them more firmly within the framework of Saussurean linguistics. Poems were to be viewed as functional structures in which signifiers and signifieds are governed by single complex set of relations. These signs must be studied in their own right, not as reflections of an external reality. Saussure's stress on the arbitrary relation between sign and referent, word and thing, helped us to detach the text from its surroundings and make of it an autonomous object. Yet, the literary work was still related to the world by the formalist concept of defamiliarization. Art estranges and undermines conventional sign systems, compels our attention to the material process of language itself, and so renews our perceptions. In not taking language for granted, we are also transforming our consciousness. More than the formalists, however, the Czech structuralists insisted on the structural unity of the work. Its elements were to be grasped as functions of a dynamic whole, with one particular level of the text, which the Prague school called the dominant, acting as the determining influence which deformed or pulled into its own field of force all the others. And that is where I will end it. It goes into semiotics next. That could be something interesting to explore, but that's a good bit on Saussure and Jakobson.